So the next thing I want to look at is building a kind of a thick wall. And actually the first part we'll do is create this brick texture. It's a tiled system again, and so it gives us a nice chance to experiment with creating these kind of textures. It's a really thick wall, so the idea is we're going to create these kind of neat windows that have this kind of depth to them. It may not show up quite accurately as a deep window for you, but if I click to this other view, you can see how we have openings here. And actually at one point, I think I made a different kind of window that has solid behind it. So we get this idea of being able to use this kind of carving of the surface, both for windows and just a general kind of aesthetic for the building. So the first thing we want to do, though, is really just get started with creating that thick wall and creating that texture for it. So I'll go to our project here, and I'll actually go to the site, and we'll create a piece of wall here. So I'm going to go to Architecture, Wall, Architectural, and I have basic generic wall 12 inches thick, and I'm going to go ahead and just draw a section of that. So let's see if we can start right here and pull that out. And I think we were making these about 40 feet long. And first thing I want to do is actually I want that to be 18 inches thick. I didn't have a one that was that deep, so let's go ahead and make one. So I'm going to duplicate the generic 12 inch, and I'm going to make it thick wall. Thick wall with brick, I guess we'll say, just to identify it. And click OK. And we'll go in there and start to edit it. That'll give us a chance to build our texture. So first thing we want to do is we want to make it 18 inches thick. So I'm going to go 18, and that's actually what I should have named it, actually 1'6". And this is where we get a chance to build the texture. So I'm going to open that up. We have, this has already been constructed in my last, let's see if I can delete this. I'd already done a run through with this. I'm going to make one, I'm going to make a new material, go through this again, and we're going to call this, rename it, and like I said, tile as brick. And the idea here is just to remind us that it's based on this idea of a tiling system. And we're going to go over to the editor here, and we're going to select tiling. And obviously this doesn't seem at all like tiling. First thing we want to do is we're going to change this to what's called a running bond, which is more like what brick looks like. And then we're going to change the aspect ratios. In this case, I chose 8 and 24 as a starting point. And I kind of upscaled this. This is actually 1 foot long, so this would be very tiny brick. So the first thing I want to do is actually change the scale. So I'm going to slide down in this editing menu, and I'm going to change the scale to what tend to work out to look like a good size to me, 8 feet. Let me make sure I do that right. And they're locked together so that they both change. And now the only other thing to do is actually start to add the kind of color and variation that we want. So with the tile color, I wanted them to look like a really dark, rich black. So I pulled this way down to, I think it was 63 was the number. And I'm just going to pick those because I want it to look exactly the same as I had done before. The grout I actually made lighter. And those were actually, this number ended up being 136 in the slider. I don't know if I can hit this right on. And it's a little tedious, obviously, but I did want it to no variation between what I actually made, and that's okay. And then some of the issues that you'll notice the grout looks a little bit large, and it's really hard until we actually apply it to the surface. But I'll tell you right now that it seems to be better if it's smaller, more realistic. And so I've changed those values. Actually, they're probably a little smaller than you would actually have in reality. They tend to look good. And we want to make a few more adjustments here. And one of those is this idea of creating some kind of variation. So this color variation, I'm going to introduce a number because the slider really doesn't give us any feedback. I'm going to give you a starting point on variation. You can see what happens now if you look up at the top. Just a nice kind of random look to the firing of those bricks. And I actually added a little value in here for fade. I'm not exactly sure how that affected things, but it seemed to have a pretty pleasant look. And this value, I don't think this really matters too much, but I had 200 for the seed value. That's just a numerical number that's put into a random number calculator to create variation. So that pretty well sets us up with that tile. So I'm going to click done on that, and then let me make sure that showed up properly. Yep. I'm going to click done on that, and okay, and okay, and okay, and now we're back to that thick brick wall. I probably should have renamed this. I won't bother doing it now. But let's go ahead now and get a 3D view of it, a model view of it. So I'm going to go grab the camera and pull back here and get a shot of our wall. And let's go ahead and set up a rendering setting. And I should have done this before. So we're going to go to realistic rendering, and excuse me, my palette is not on the screen. Oops. Oh, I'm not on the screen. There we go. And realistic rendering, no edges like I like. That's my preference. A little more realistic looking. I'm going to add some lighting. I'm going to light this just with a single light source from the top left. That'll throw the shadows behind it. That didn't show up on your screen. I'm sorry about that. So I hit lighting. I'll click OK. We always add that sky into the background. Or it could be a gradient if you wanted. Just helps us to put things in context. So there we have our brick. We're all set with it. Let's actually zoom in and see what it looks like. You can see how nicely it holds up as you kind of zoom in on it. Looks a little on the fuzzy side there, but that's pretty good. Now we have a lot of control over the way we make our brick surfaces look. There seems to be enough variation. And one of the important things is we're not getting that feeling of a repeat pattern in things. So that starts us with our wall. Next thing we'll look at is creating that kind of carved out window look.